This is starting to freak me out a little now. My boyfriend told me the other night that I said, "She's here," in my sleep. I didn't think anything of it and said I was probably just dreaming and said it happened again last night. I don't remember anything. Now I'm starting to wonder about what is up with this, happening twice in a row, and it's starting to scare me a little. I have no clue who she is, but apparently she is here, or she comes in my sleep. I try to be logical on these types of things, and that I could be having a reoccurring dream that I am not remembering. But me saying that is so strange. I rarely talk in my sleep. Any ideas on figuring out who she is? Yesterday at 9:30 p.m., I was home alone, dog sitting while my family went out to a friend's place to celebrate their birthday. Normally I would go, but I felt a bit under the weather, so I decided not to, and instead I stayed home. Nobody was in the house except for me and my dog, who laid on the hardwood floor next to the couch. I was watching a movie when my dog woke up. She picked up her head and started staring down the corridor that led to the staircase, and she started barking. At first, I didn't think anything of it. It wasn't unusual for my dog to start barking, but this time it was different. She was scared. She got spooked when she propped herself up on the first step of the staircase. She tucked her tail in between her legs and trotted back to me. I knew something was up. She's not a dog that gets easily startled. She'll start an argument with dogs 2 to 3 times her size. I found it extremely odd. Then I start to hear a banging noise coming from upstairs, my parents' room. Sounded like someone or something was banging on the headdresser. I paused the movie I was watching so I could have a better hearing of what it was. At first I thought I was just hearing and imagining things, but then I hear footsteps running upstairs. I could feel the impacts of their feet hitting the floor. I was terrified. I immediately got up. I thought that someone had broken in, but the house was locked. There's no way someone could have broken in. I called my parents in a panic. They said they'd be home soon, but it could be some time since it was raining heavily, and they didn't want to take any chances on the road. While on the phone with my mom, she explained to me that she's also experienced similar things. Unexplained sounds, random sleep paralysis, followed by the sensation of something was watching over her. Once the rest of my family got home, I better explained what I had heard. We went upstairs to look at their room. We found clothing thrown all over the place. The drawers were open and the TV was on. The place had been ransacked. This was the first paranormal experience I've had. I don't know what it is in my house. All I know is that it scared the shit out of me. Is there some bad spirit in my house? And why is it going after me and my mom? Something strange happened to me last night. Me and my friend were in my room and I was looking outside my door when I saw a girl we know walk through the hallway in my friend's room that's next door. I saw that same girl. I saw that the girl went in but did not come out. So I told my friend to check it out, but there was no person there. There was only one door out of that room, and it's through the hallway. Next minutes, we found that girl in the bathroom, and another person confirmed that she was in the bathroom this entire time. I have no explanation for this, but it was really strange. Some background on Hankey Church and Cemetery. The church was built by German Lutheran immigrants in 1796. The church and cemetery are located in the rural area of Murraysville, Pennsylvania. The cemetery has a handful of people buried there, including some Revolutionary War soldiers and various others from the 1800s. At one time it said that one of the church members' daughters drowned in the creek by the church. Also that a pastor was lynched by the church members for adultery. The church was destroyed by a fire under suspicious circumstances in August 1973. Being an actual local, it was said that there were kids in the church when this happened. The graveyard across the street was not affected and remains there today. Surrounding the cemetery is a white picket fence, and they say if you see it opened at night, that the spirits of the dead are out roaming. Also, that the handprints of the children will appear to the car. My hanky church experience was this. Way back when I was a teenager, cell phones were just emerging and we had a dial-up internet still. We typically had to find other way to entertain ourselves. One of those things were exploring supposedly haunted areas around Pittsburgh. One place literally just down the street. Living in this area my whole life, we constantly heard the stories of Hanky Church. That the church had burned down with young children trapped inside, and if you go up on a cold night, you can see where the children touched your car, leaving handprints. We, two best friends and her boyfriend, being non-believers, piled into a friend's car and took a trip up to see if anything happened. We arrived and parked by the cemetery. We see the gate is opened and get out to smoke a joint and just bullshit. While we were talking, we can hear a weird noise, assuming it was an animal or we were just paranoid. But we just continue talking. We are in mid-conversation and I hear it again. This time, the hair on my arm starts to stand up and we all give one another that look that we know we're not alone. My friend's boyfriend yell out, "Who's there?" We hear no sounds, but at this point we're freaked out, so we decided to leave. We all get into the car. The guy driving turns the key over and it lights up and turn on for a second but stops. He tried it 3 times and nothing. At this point, we were really starting to get scared. He gets out, checks something under the hood, and tries to start the car again. Nothing. 2 of us had phones, but of course mine was dead. And the other girls didn't have any bars. Of course, right? We were still hearing something periodically outside of the car by the cemetery. So at this point, we're scared shitless. Her boyfriend tries to start the car again, and it starts. I am thinking, thank Jesus, we get the hell out of there. As we were driving away, the windows were foggy, defrosting, and on the back window were 2 handprints. Talking with my friends later, her boyfriend said he had never had issues before or after with the car not starting. Not super terrifying, but that's it, my ghost experience. In 2013, my grandmother died, and I slept in her room sometime later. I felt an unearthly dark presence there with me in the room as I was trying to sleep. I was terrified. To me, it felt real. There was something there with me. I asked Jesus to protect me. I felt a warm glow all over me, and whatever was there in the room was gone. I've never experienced anything like this before or ever since. Last year, during a bout of extreme depression, my partner and I went to sleep during a stormy night. We woke up to the dog barking. My partner said the dog was making strange noises. It all felt a bit uneasy. A few hours later, we woke back up at 3 a.m. The radio had turned itself on, and death metal was blaring, scaring the absolute crap out of us. So, as a kid, my sister said she would always see this one little boy. She's 24 now, but says she can still see him clearly and remembers he was a small, dirty child with ginger hair and dressed like a Victorian working-class kid with a shirt and braces, flat cap, etc. This wasn't an imaginary friend either, because she told us that she was terrified of him and hated it when he'd appear. He'd apparently appear in her room on a night or in another places of the house that we still live in. She said he was friendly and never tried to harm or scare her, but she was just scared of him for some reason. One clear memory she has is when my mom and my dad were packing early one morning to go on holiday with her. My sister was set in the living room eating breakfast. It was like 4 a.m. and the couch she was on was opposite a window into the back garden. As she was eating, she looked out of the window and saw him there, smiling and waving at her. This terrified my sister, who burst into tears and sat and cried till my parents came in. As she got older, she saw him less and less, and now it's been over a decade since she has last saw him. What do you think it was? I had an imaginary friend growing up, but it was clearly imaginary. I didn't see anything, and I knew I was talking to nothing, but this was different. Sure, it could have been an overactive imagination, but how does that explain my sister saw him so clear and multiple times? She said she'd always cry and he would not go away. What do you think? I don't really know how to explain this, but when I was younger, like kindergarten or elementary school age, I could close my eyes and visit people around the world. It wasn't a dream, it wasn't fantasy. I was awake. Sometimes I would even enter other times. I would visit this girl in China who was my age, and I saw the hallway of her apartment where she lived with her mother. I still remember the exact way it looked. It also wasn't my past life, because I saw the girl and she knew that I was present. We would play in her room. It was all very weird. I still remember her name. It started with a T, but I don't know how to spell it. She wasn't the only one I visited. There are so many places I went to, but I was awake every time, and I know that it was real. I have a feeling that if I would ever see the girl in public, we would recognize each other. This all happened when I was about 14. I wasn't much of a special person when I was younger. I mainly preferred to stay inside and just play video games. And because of that, I would be home alone a lot. So that day was normal. I sometimes wouldn't hear my family leave because I would always have my headset turned up playing games. And all of a sudden, it sounded like my mother calling my name. You know, the type you hear when your mom needs help? Well, I took my headset off and waited to hear it again, because maybe I was tripping. Sure enough, I heard it again. But it sounded like it was coming from outside. I was walking towards my kitchen and checked all the rooms, and I was home alone. And I heard it again outside. For some reason, instead of going outside, I just went to my garage and checked through the little peephole you can see through on our garage door. No one was there. My parents' cars were gone. I ran inside and called my mom and asked where she was, and she said she was with my sister. My hairs went up because the house sounded just like my mom. And I just hung up on my mom and went to my room and calmed myself. And when my mom came back, I told her what happened. Before I tell my story, I would like you to know that my English is not my first language, so I'm sorry for any grammatical mistakes. This happened back in the beginning of 2019. Me and my family had been living in a very old wooden house for about 3 years before this happened. It was a really big and old house that had a floor made out of wood and a really big window with no curtains that gave us the view of the backyard that had no lighting system, so it was completely dark during the night. Before my family, the house stayed empty for about 5 years, and the only people to ever live there before us and besides the original owner was a couple that only stayed there for a couple of months. I had never been alone at night at that house, considering that my parents, or at least my sister, were always home with me during the nighttime. When we first moved there, I spent a year having the worst nightmares of my life. It was really traumatizing. One day when my parents were traveling to visit my brother, who lived 8 hours away and would only come back the next day, my sister decided to go on a date with her boyfriend around 7 p.m. and left me alone in the house. Even though I had always been kind of creeped out by the big house, that for some reason still had incandescent lamps making it creepier at night. In that specific day, I was not really worried when she left me alone there. Obviously, before she left, I checked to see if all the doors and windows were locked, and they were, so I wasn't really worried about it. And I lived in a very safe and good neighborhood, so I wasn't really paranoid about burglars or something. When it was around 8 p.m. and I was watching some TV show in my sister's room, located in the end of the hallway of the first floor, I heard footsteps coming from the living room. And at first I just thought it was my dad because this person seemed to be wearing boots. But then I remembered that I was completely by myself and the house was completely locked. I hadn't heard any door or window open. And after pausing my TV show and knowing the TV on the living room was off, I kept hearing something walk around the living room with a really loud and heavy footsteps. The steps seemed kind of random. This person seemed to just be walking in circles or something, but the steps became louder and closer, and I realized that they entered the hallway and were walking to my sister's bedroom. The door was in the far right of the room, and the bed was in the far left on the opposite wall, so I couldn't see the hallway or anything besides the door. The footsteps were getting closer to the room, and then suddenly stopped really close to the door, but not close enough for me to see it. After some silent seconds, the footsteps turned around and walked back to the living room, stopping somewhat in the middle of it. I waited some minutes, and not hearing these sounds anymore, I, in a dumb move, decided to check around the house to see if I'd find someone. I checked everywhere on the first floor, and I checked all the windows and doors and found nothing. The only place I didn't go to alone was the second floor, which the only way to get there was by walking in a really old metal spiral staircase. I called my sister, and when she got there, we went to the second floor together and to the outside of the house and found nothing. The thing that sticked with me the most is that if this was a person, it would have been impossible for them to get up those metal stairs without making any noises, considering how loud their footsteps were. After this day, I never stayed alone at the house there, and we moved shortly after. Not related to this, by the way. Nobody in my family believed me at the time and just called me crazy. I always had nightmares when living in that house, before and after what happened, especially when I slept in my sister's bedroom. There are some other details that I didn't find really necessary to put in here, but what I told you is basically the most important part of the story. I just wanted to tell someone about this because no one ever believed me. Thanks for reading my experience. I had a weird experience a week or so ago. I'm not sure why this happened, but I hallucinated and saw something around 6 feet with the skull of a deer, slightly hunched back, feathery shoulders, and its body was partially made of straw, flesh, and bone. It zipped towards me and covered about 15 feet in less than a second and triggered my flight or fight and made me run inside screaming. Anyone else experienced anything like this before? It was a one-time thing, and I still can't stop thinking about how bizarre it was, and the fact it made me feel true fear for the first time in my life. I have no history of things like this happening, and I've been exploring various venues as to what this may have been. If anyone has any ideas of what happened or similar experiences, I'd love to hear them.